The undoing of the New Deal has been undertaken about 5, maybe 6 seconds after the New Deal was passed. It has been the objective of the employer class in this country uh, since the 1930s. They have pursued that objective pretty single mindedly. They have given the Republican Party the major task of doing that, but they've demanded that the Democrats at least don't stand in the way. And the Democrats, particularly in recent years, have obliged. That is, the difference between the two parties, which started out, we, the Democrats, are the party of Franklin Roosevelt, you, the Republicans, are the party that is opposed. It became instead the Republicans are the ones who want to roll back the New Deal quickly, and the Democrats want to go much more slowly. And I understand that, and that's the politics we've lived with. But here's the things I would add. When Roosevelt brought the government in, he said over and over again, we have to do this to save capitalism. In other words, he wanted to underscore he's not the enemy of capitalism. He's not a red. He's not a socialist, any of that. He is bringing the government in for something that socialists and communists wouldn't have wanted, namely the preservation or the strengthening of capitalism. And there's a certain irony, because if you listen carefully to Mr. Trump, he's kind of making the same claim. He's bringing back a robust capitalism because it isn't here anymore. MAGA is a statement that what used to be is better than what we have, which is why he would put it on his little red hat. He is also, in his mind, and in the mind of the employer class of the United States, saving capitalism. Although his recipe is not bring the government in, it is the opposite. Kick the government out as the way to solve it. And he's doing it literally taking, a meat cleaver and chopping off agencies of the government. Just for example, as a professor, my students are hysterically worried. Many of them are partly sustained by government grants because they work on research programs or on data gathering procedures within the university or within collaborative agreements between universities and other institutions. Everything is up in the air. They don't know whether they will have this job. They therefore don't know whether they will have the money without which they cannot finish their educations. They don't know where else to turn. Some of them have tried to go get jobs in the private sector, which is, of course, what all of the laid off public employees are going to be doing, and that's driving down. The private employers are understanding they can get one of these refugees from a public job and pay them much less and give them much poorer working conditions than they had to give before. Federal government is laying off. The private sector sits there with an influx of desperate people who can't go back to the public sector. Let's remember that when you fire the way they're doing, you fire, for example, a person who's been there for 10 years. That's their career. They expected to move up a certain kind of career ladder, which is established in most government jobs. And if you do your job well, then after a certain number of years, you get promoted to some other higher level. All that's gone. It's not just that they don't have their job and they don't have their paycheck, but it's also that their career is gone. If they're going over to the private sector, they come with no seniority, with no accumulated anything. And, it's just, it transforms their life. It transforms the lives of their families and anybody who depends on them. It affects the community because these people are going to be saving money for the unknown future they face rather than spending as they might otherwise have done. So as an economist, I can assure you the ramifications of this are staggering, and they're carefully avoided being spoken about. Not one word from Mr. Musk, not one word from Mr. Trump. about all of the consequences. I mean, there's no nice way to say this, Mitch. There's this phony representation. Here's the nice things we say are associated. Well, what about all the other things? Well, not a word about it. I mean, give you a simple example. The first thing that an unemployed public employee in this country does is to go on unemployment insurance. Everybody understands that. All right, let me be an economist now. While you were working for the U.S. government, they paid you and you did your work. Now they fired you, but you go on unemployment. The government continues to pay you a little less than what you got before, but the difference is you don't give anything back because they fired you. But the cost to the government, whatever the benefit is of not paying your salary, you'd have to subtract from that the fact that they now have a new unemployed person to give unemployment insurance to. That's a cost to the government. And you'd have to weigh the cost. Whoa, and you're giving the government, the worker, a little less money, but you're not getting any of whatever it is that worker was doing. And that's not a good deal. And that's a very bad deal.
Well, it depends what your goal is, right? Because that unemployment will dry up, right? That's right. That's not forever.
It's not forever, but it means if you're honest and you're going to do this all in a big sudden rush, which is what they're doing, then the impact on the unemployment fund will be severe because it's so concentrated in a short amount of time. And so what will that do to the government's budget, to its balance? And of course, if these people stay on longer unemployed, well, then, that also has economic effects. Those people do not stop eating when their unemployment runs out. They still need a jacket. They still need a place to sleep. They still need transportation. They're going to be consuming goods and services in this country, but they're not going to be able to contribute to producing them. For the society as a whole, this is an enormous cost. That's why we feel bad when there's unemployment. It's considered a social problem because the people who are unemployed could contribute. We know that because they held the jobs for years. They do their job. And when they go unemployed, they continue to consume goods and services, but they no longer participate in producing them. You don't need a genius to understand for the society as a whole, that's not good. But you're right, Mitch. There is something good here. And you know what it is? It's good for the employers because what's being done, and if I have nothing else to say to you today, this is the issue. This is all part of what deserves the name, however scary you find it, of class war, class struggle. This is the employer class being handed by the government they have put in what they dreamed of. A desperate American working class. You may not feel it yet, but you will. Even if you're in the private sector, these cascades of government workers deprived of their livelihood, that's going to impact all of us sooner or later, one way or another, probably in lots of ways. But the net effect is crystal clear. Wages coming down and job security gone. I mean, when I was a young person, I thought of working for the government. And I remember people advising me in my own family, if you work for the government, you won't get paid as much, but you will have job security.
A pension.
Okay. Millions of people were led to believe that and believed it. And they made decisions about where to live and what kind of job to look for and whether to take out a mortgage to have a home with their family based on an assumption of security. Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk have taken a meat axe to that. Even if you haven't yet lost your government job, think a minute. Your security is gone. You're seeing what's happening in the offices around you. You're not crazy. You can see I could be next. Will they get to me next week, next month, next year? How am I going to live my life like this? I went into this job being told by the employer, by the HR department here, that this was a secure job. If I did my job properly, I could count on it. All that's gone. That has been taken away from millions of people. They are going to live with that, and they are going to exude the economic and the emotional costs of all of that. None of that is being faced. We're being told, isn't it wonderful? We are becoming more efficient. Oh my God. That's putting a lipstick on something that remains a pig even after you've put the lipstick on.